everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you enjoy this political education content. And today will be the day I earn that subscription. For today's story, I'm going to try to talk a little bit about Alaska, because Alaska has adopted what's called instant runoff voting, also known as single transferable vote. So if you ever hear those descriptions, they're describing the same thing: instant runoff voting or single transferable vote. It is a different voting method that is typically used in the United States. In fact, Alaska is only the second state to adopt it after Maine had adopted it previously. And it is a process that allows for a more nuanced expression of a vote. So I'm going to go through what happened, and I'm going to go through trying to explain why it's a good thing, at least in my humble opinion. So first of all, what we normally do in the United States in elections is called first past the post. All right. First past the post is what we normally use. And this is just whoever has the most votes wins. Now, this sounds like a really good idea, but it has a lot of problems with it. And the way to illustrate the problems with it is by way of example. All right. So let's suppose you have 10 people running for office. If they split their vote evenly, if 10 people split the vote evenly for office, then they each get 10% of the vote. Well, what if one of them is just slightly more popular than the other 9, right? Then one person has 11% of the vote, and the other people distribute the remainder evenly, which means that the person who has 11% of the vote wins because they got the most votes, right? If the person with the most votes wins, then in our hypothetical election, with 10 candidates who split the vote evenly, except one was just slightly more popular than the rest, we have a person who wins with only 11% of the vote because they got the most. So even though 89% of people did not vote for that person wins. This allows for people to win without a majority of the vote. And we've even seen this happen in presidential elections, where people do not necessarily have the majority of the vote, but still win, because all you need is the most votes. And so you can lead to this situation where you potentially have someone with less than majority winning. It also leads to a situation where people tend to compromise their vote out of desire for their vote to count more. This is the idea of the wasted vote, that you are wasting your vote by voting for a third party. And what does that mean, to waste your vote? Well, again, the best way to describe it is by illustration. Let's suppose it's the runoff between Trump and Clinton, and you believe in your heart that the race is going to be close. You think that it's going to be really close between Trump and Clinton. Let's suppose that you think that Trump is the better candidate than Clinton. You think that Trump should win over Clinton, but Trump isn't necessarily your first choice. Let's suppose your first choice is really the libertarian. So in your heart of hearts, you would like the libertarian to win. You'd like the libertarian to be president. But if that's not going to happen, you'd like Trump to be president before you'd like Clinton to be president. All right, so you're a voter in the U.S. voting system, and you go into the ballot booth, and it says select one, right? Select one. That's the normal way we do it. Select one out of the pool. Whoever gets the most votes win. So you're thinking about this as a strategic voter. And you say to yourself, well, I could vote for the libertarian. That's who I really want in this hypothetical. I really want the libertarian, or I really want the Green Party, or I really want the Constitutional Party, or I really want the Patriot Party, or I really want, insert your political illustration of choice in this sentence, right? That is really your heart-to-heart choice. But of course, that person isn't going to win. There's no chance of them winning. So your vote would be wasted, but that's really who you want. So you could vote on principle, and of course, some people do. But a lot of people make a different choice, which is to make a strategic choice. They say, well, my vote can't possibly get the person I really want elected. I can't really get the Libertarian, Green Party, Constitutional Party, Patriot Party, whatever party person elected. That's not possible. But what I could do is cast my vote as between Trump and Clinton. That is where my vote might actually make a difference. If it's going to make a difference anywhere, it's going to make a difference there. And so therefore, I'm going to vote for Trump, even though they're not my first choice, because I only get one choice. Now, of course, you, my friend, this person in the voting booth making this decision, are, of course, not unique. A lot of people in the United States are making this choice all the time. So in some sense, we don't really know how popular the Libertarian or the Green Party or the Constitutional Party or the Patriot Party or whatever your party of choice is, we don't really know in some sense how popular they are, because a lot of people are going in and making the strategic choice. Some people are voting for just pure principle. It's their vote. It's they want the way they want to cast it. That's to be understood. But a lot of people are not going to do that. They're going to try to make the decision as to where between the two it is most valid. And it leads to the situation where there's this saying that if you're not voting for the person in second place, you're voting for the person in first place implicitly, right? The only thing you can really do in a first past the post system is vote for the person who's in second place. Because if you do that, maybe they'll become the person in first place. But if you're doing anything else, if you're not elevating the person in second place, well, then by function, you're elevating the person in first place. So the problem with our current voting system is it leads to these problems. It leads to the problem where you run into a situation where you can have a massively splintered vote and one person wins with a bare fraction of the vote, at least hypothetically. And we've seen that to some degree. For example, in the special elections for California governor, for example, where everyone, their brother gets involved, right? And you have a split vote that's like split 600 ways. And then you wind up with these situations where the person who wins doesn't need anything like a majority because the vote splits so many ways. So that's one problem. And the other problem you have is with strategic voting, right? The person really in their heart of hearts wants to vote for a libertarian. The person really in their heart of heart wants to vote for a constitutional party. But they're not going to do that because they are thinking themselves, well, where can my vote do the most good? And so they make the compromise choice. They don't want their vote to be wasted. All right. So with all that background and explanation of how the United States typically does elections, let's talk about this idea that Alaska has called instant runoff voting or single transferable vote. Now, for what it's worth, by the way, this system is used elsewhere in the world. So this isn't like an American invention, or at least it wasn't, at least it's not used that much in America. Although, as I say, Maine adopted it, although I think it was struck down by the Maine Supreme Court for state constitutional reasons, which I am not really competent to speak to, but whatever. And Alaska has adopted it for its internal elections, right? So the way Alaska has decided to do its primaries is it says, what if we put all the candidates from both parties onto one big ballot, right? So in order to determine who's going to run in the general election, right, we could do it the way that most states do it. Most states do it by they have the Republican, each party. The way most states do it is that each party has its own primary or other process to nominate. Some parties don't nominate through a election. Some states, some parties just appoint somebody. They can appoint basically by any method they wish. Sometimes it's by voting, sometimes not. And each party sends whoever they want through whatever process they want into the general election. You vote for one of the names, and that whoever gets the most votes wins, right? That's one way of doing it, right? Every party does it individually. All the parties, once they've selected someone, we put all their names on the ballot, select your favorite, whoever gets the most votes wins. All right, so what Alaska does is Alaska had a different idea for the primaries. It said, okay, what if instead of that system where every party can nominate somebody, what if instead if we did that, what if only 4 people were going to be in the election for the general election, all right? A maximum of 4 people, right? So rather than every party gets a space on the general election ballot, right? And every party gets 1 space on the general election ballot, mind you. Rather than doing that, what if instead we had only 4 candidates on the ballot for the general election? Well, there are more than 4 parties, including in Alaska, mind you, where there's also the Alaska Independence Party, among other parties. So it's like, okay, so how do we determine which of these parties gets to be on the general election ballot? Which of the 4 people? And incidentally, it could be more than 1 person from each party. So it could hypothetically be 4 Republicans on the ballot in the general election, or it could be 4 Democrats, or it could be 4 whatever, right? How do we determine which 4 people are going to be on the ballot in the general election? And the way that Alaska decided to do that was by having everyone on one big primary ballot, okay? So you take all the people from all the parties, Democrat, Republican, whatever, independent, doesn't matter. You take all the people and put them on one big ballot for the primaries, okay? And then you say to the people of Alaska, okay, pick 1 or more candidates that you like in ranked order, right? So that's why it's called ranked choice voting. It's called single transferable vote. It's called instant runoff voting, right? It's called by all these names because now we're selecting not just one name, we're selecting one or more names and critically putting them in some kind of ranked order. All right. So if you're a die-hard Republican and you like all the Republicans and there's multiple Republicans then what you can do is you can vote for many Republicans, right? Rather than simply voting for one Republican, you can vote for all the Republicans and you vote for them in order. And if all of your fellow citizens in Alaska are similarly minded, they just love the Republicans so very, very much, all they want is Republicans, then no problem. You got 4 Republicans on the ballots for the general election. Okay, 4 names, and they're all Republican. Okay, that's a possible outcome, right? So that's how you do that. You ask them to put one or more people on the ballot, and you ask them to put it in a ranked preference. So if you're the kind of person who, wants minority, so if you're the kind of person who, really likes a whole bunch of third parties, maybe you put the Libertarian person first. Maybe you put the Green Party second. Maybe you put the Constitution Party third. Maybe you put the Alaska Independence Party fourth. Maybe you put the Republican Party fifth, right? Whatever it is you want to do, it's completely up to you. And this allows you to express a much more nuanced view. It allows you to express a more nuanced perspective, right? And it prevents this issue with the split vote, right? So one of the things that people have been saying, it's like, there's only like one Democrat, there's 2 Republicans, so that's splitting the vote. You can't, that's the whole point of instant runoff voting, single transferable vote, ranked choice voting, whatever you call it. You can't split the vote, right? It doesn't make sense because you get to vote for one or more. So the Republicans now are not in a situation where they have to choose between the 2 candidates, the 2 Republicans who are running, because they can vote for them both and they both can win. That's the key in Alaska, right? So it's not like, the Democrats only have one candidate running. The Republicans have 2 candidates running. The Republicans are going to split their vote between the 2. So that's not fair to the Republicans. No, that's not how that works in instant runoff voting. How it works in instant runoff voting is you figure out if, in order to determine if you want 4 winners, right? If that's what you're trying to determine, you want 4 winners from the primary election to advance the general election. Okay, that's how many total winners you want. No problem. How do you do that? You just figure out who the 4 most popular people are. How do you do that? Well, all you do is you take all the ballots, you stack them according to first preference order, right? So if you have 20 people running, you have 20 piles of ballots. They're in first person order, right? You have 20 piles of names. Well, 20 piles of names is too many, right? There's 20 candidates. I can only have 4, and I've got 20. So what do I do? Well, it's really easy what you do there. You take the person who has the least number of votes. You take the person who has the smallest pile, right? And you're like, well, you're not winning because you're the least popular, right? You had the fewest first person votes of any candidate, right? The people just are not really thrilled with you. So you don't win, right? So we take all your ballots, we scratch the first choice name off the ballots. We can do this literally or metaphorically, however you like, but it doesn't really matter, right? So you just take the ballot, it has a list of names on it, right? It's been stacked according to the first name on the ballot. That's how they've been stacked. We've got 20 stacks. We figure out which stack has the smallest, right? And we take a look at that ballot and we scratch out the first name on the list because it was in that pile because that was the first name, but we know they're not going to win because they have the least number of votes of any pile. So we scratch out that top name and then we say, okay, what do we do now? Oh, well, it so happens the voter has told us what to do. The voter has told us because they've provided a ranked order preference what they'd like to do next. So it's like, well, since your first choice isn't winning, voter, what do you want to do? Oh, it tells me right there on the ballot because the voter told me in ranked order who their second choice would be. No problem. So I take all the ballots. I look at now the top name on the list, which is, which was number 2, but it's now number 1 because no number 1's gone because they were the least popular. So I take a look at the top name on the ballot, and now I take the ballots and I redistribute them according to the second preference, right? Now I've got 19 piles. Well, 19 is more than 4, so what do? Rinse, repeat, right? Oh, which pile has the smallest of the 19? Oh, this guy. Okay, strike the top name off the list. Strike the top name off the list because that's the reason it's in that pile, because it's now the top name on the list. Strike the top name off the list. Take all the ballots, redistribute. Now I've got 18 piles, and so forth and so on until I've got 4 piles. And those are the 4 that win because they're the 4 that are the most popular by everybody. They're the person that won the election. Now, one of the key things to remember here, and one of the things that is sometimes a little hard when I describe this to people, is like, oh, that defies one person, one vote. It doesn't, because every voter has as much voting power as every other voter does in every round, right? Every round, we look at who is the top name on the ballot, right? Now, that name changes as the process proceeds, but every single time we're looking at the top name on the ballot, right? We've already determined that the 20th most popular person isn't going to win, so we're going to ignore their name. And now we're just going to look at the top listed name on the ballot of every single ballot. As to 19 piles, we don't have to redistribute them because they're already in the right place. But if you like, we could take all the ballots out of their 19 individual. We could take all the ballots out of their individual piles, and we could redistribute them. Now, this would be a little bit silly because we've already got 19 piles exactly where they're supposed to be, but we could, right, if it makes things easier for you to conceptualize. So we take these 19 ballots, we take these ballots and we redistribute them according to the top line preference of the 20 of them. So of the one that's most powerful. So that is the way that Alaska is doing this. So there is no issue with multiple Republicans running. There's no issue with multiple Republicans splitting the vote. That doesn't really make conceptual sense, right? It doesn't make conceptual sense because every voter is effectively able to vote for 4 people. Every voter has the exact same power. And so you can vote for 4 Republicans, and you don't have to pick and choose. I mean, I suppose you have to pick and choose so much as you have to pick which 4 Republicans you like the most if there's more than 4 of them running, but that's something you had to do anyway when you were in the system before. I mean, before you had to pick your favorite Republican because all you could do was vote for one, right? You could only vote for one Republican. So now you can vote for 4 times as many Republicans, or 4 times as many Democrats, or 4 times as many Libertarians, or 4 times as many whatever else you want to vote for, right? And it's totally, completely fair. Every voter has equal voting power in every stage of the election. And we just take a look and we look at the voter and we ask, the voter tells us what to do, right? If whatever their highest listed vote is, gets counted every single round. Once we determine that person is last place, we'll strike the name off the list, and then we ask the voter rhetorically, who's your second choice? And no problem, the voter's already told us. So we redistribute, and that's how we do it. And so it's completely up to the voter to determine how many votes they want to give. You can only put one name down. If only one name is down, then, that's fine. And if your candidate gets eliminated, then, you don't have any more votes. So you are now no longer valid, but that was your decision, right? You can vote, you can choose, well, I only support these candidates and I'm not willing to choose beyond that. It's completely up to you. And you can rank all of them in order or any other combination. And I really like it as a system because it has so someone said they don't know what my acronyms are, so I'll explain it again. Instant runoff voting, it's called IRV, instant runoff voting. Single transferable vote, STV, also called ranked choice voting, RCV, right? It's called by different names. But it's all the same thing. So whether you call instant runoff voting, single transferable vote, or ranked choice voting, it's all the same thing. And this is the process of how this is going on, right? Is this methodology. And I really like it because it allows the voter to express a much more nuanced view of what they want, right? So me, for example, when I go to the voting booth, if this were the system in place, right? If I really want the libertarian to win, to be president, right? But I want, if the election I'm running is Trump versus Clinton, but I really want the libertarian to win, I no longer have to decide whether or not I want to throw my vote away. I no longer have to make that decision because now I can have my cake and eat it too. I can vote for the candidate I really, really want, and so can everyone else. And assuming they don't win, my vote still counts to select which of the major candidates I really want to win too. So someone said, is IRV STV just for the primaries or general too? My understanding is for it's for both. It's for both. Because according to the way that Alaska's decided to do it is we're going to put 4 names on the general election. Now I'm not exactly sure how they came up with 4 as opposed to 2, but they did. They said, okay, how about 4? Okay. So yeah, we are going to do instant runoff voting in the general election too. Rank the 4 candidates according to your favorite. Now you only have 4 choices, so rank the 4 in your order of preference, and we'll cast by that, right? So yeah, so you no longer have these systems. So I really like the way Alaska is doing this. I think the way Alaska is doing this is the best system, and if anything, it favors non-mainstream candidates. The way the system is, it favors third parties. It favors smaller parties. It favors people unlikely to win because voters now are no longer in the situation where they are feeling like they have to make a decision they don't really want to make. So, like in a normal election, maybe the Libertarian only gets 3%. But is it really 3% or is it more? I mean, how much support does the Libertarian candidate really have? You don't really know because maybe some number of their voters made the tactical decision. So now you have a much more accurate reflection of what voters really want. So maybe it turns out that 10% of the voters really favor the Libertarian candidate. Well, that makes a big difference going forward. Like it makes a big difference that say, oh, the Libertarian candidate isn't just 3% of the vote, it's 10% of the vote. That makes a big difference. And it also makes a difference in as to the politicians who win, because they know that 10% of the base really likes the Libertarian candidate. And so it increases the probability they're going to pick more Libertarian policies because they want to capture those voters, right? I want to win the election. If I want to win the election, boy, oh boy, I better do what I can to capture that now 10% of my voting base. It's not just 3%, now it's 10%. So I'm more likely to do things that will appease them. I'm more likely to do things, and it will drive everything towards a more accurate voting system. So yeah, that's how it works. So I hope all that makes sense because I wanted to explain that. It does not favor the Dems. It does not favor the Dems. It favors no party in particular. If you're saying it favors the Dems, you fundamentally do not understand instant runoff voting. You fundamentally do not understand single transferable vote. You fundamentally do not understand ranked choice, right? To say it favors the Dems is to completely misunderstand the system. Like there's, what if you rank one candidate all 4 times? Well, the machine won't let you do that, right? And your vote is either invalid or we just have to cross off the name 4 times. So either ways, it's like, yeah. And the jungle election, so the putting all the candidates together in one big election, like California does, is a jungle primary, but California doesn't have instant runoff voting. So you still have to pick one instead of one or more. So so it doesn't really, Dems are more willing to drop out and support one Dem. Well, that's a feature of their politics rather than a feature. That's not, even assuming that's true, that goes to the character traits of the Democrats, right? That's not favoring the Republicans or Democrats. That's just like, well, the Democrats are more willing to do X. Well, that's the Democrats' choice. The Republicans are not precluded from making that choice. Assuming you're right and Democrats are more willing to drop out and support other Democrats, well, the Republicans can do that or not. There's nothing inherently favoring them more or others. So yeah. Hi from Alaska. I voted yesterday. Cool. Yeah. So I really, in the favor of Alaska, more likely favors Democrats. I don't know if that's true. And even if that is true, then I don't think that's a problem. Because assuming the thing with single transferable vote, the thing with instant runoff voting, the thing with ranked choice voting, in my view, is it more accurately reflects voters' preferences. So if it winds up the case being, if the case winds up being that this helps the Democrats, then that's just a more accurate reflection of what the public actually wants. Because you've moved from a situation where it's vote for one to voting one or more. So maybe it's the case that the vast majority of Alaskans, when put to the wire, will vote Republican. But if they're allowed a more nuanced view, they will show a more nuanced view that they actually have more of a preference for Democrats than their vote might otherwise indicate. So if it turns out that the system favors Democrats, then it's because the voters themselves are actually the voters themselves are reflecting a preference that is being distilled. And it may be true that Alaska, I tend to think it's a really good system. So I really strongly support instant runoff voting. I think it's a fantastic thing, and if I had the power, if I had the power from on high as king for a day, it's one of two changes to the Constitution I would make. The other change, by the way, which we don't need to go into right now, is to require that all voting districts be maximally compact. I think between having ranked choice voting and maximally compact districts, it would go a long way to solving a lot of America's political ills, and it would allow for more accurate reflections of what voters actually want. So, yeah, and I think that would be positive. So, anyways, I just want to do a really quick stream trying to explain this, because people seem to be confused. People seem to think that the Republicans will split the vote or something like that, and that's not how this is working. Because voters can vote for as many Republican candidates as they want, and they could hypothetically have 4 on the ballot if that's what they want, right? So it's not an issue of splitting the vote. And if you really if there's 8 Republicans running, then you get to select in order of preference which 4 you really want, right? So if there's 8 Republicans running, and the race becomes, well, which one of them do you want? You don't have a situation where you split the vote, because in a hypothetical race where it's only 8 Republicans running in the hypothetical race, you can vote for as many Republicans as you want. The least popular Republican gets stricken from the ballot. We redistribute, and so forth and so on. So yeah. Yeah, in general, you like the idea. What may have criticisms, which may or may not come to fruition. Yeah, we'll see if there's problems in the real world with any of this, but I like it. I'm not sure in particular why Alaska said 4 people in the general election, but okay. I mean, that's fine too. That's fine too. And let me see if there's any other questions really fast. There's actually apparently a few states that do ranked voting, but 1 or 2 will actually still split the parties. So it's really ranking the Republicans on one ballot and separate on the Democratic ballot. I don't necessarily have a problem with that either. I don't necessarily have a problem with keeping it individualized by party and doing ranked choice. I don't have a problem with doing ranked choice voting within the parties and then that ranked choice voting within the general election. I don't necessarily have a strong preference one way or another on the general primary thing, although it does theoretically allow people to even have more expressed nuanced votes. So it could be a good thing. But I haven't thought it through all the way. All right, so I'm going to sign off for now because that's really all I wanted to do. I just really wanted to share this and try to explain what's going on, and I think it's a really positive thing. I think it's a good thing, and hopefully it will spread and more states will adopt it. I think that would be good. I'm going to sign off for now. If you've enjoyed this political explainer on ranked choice voting, instant runoff voting, single transferable vote, if you've enjoyed me trying to explain this, please remember to give it a like, comment, subscribe, all the rest of it. You understand how the counting works? I can try to explain it again. But I think it's easier to imagine it in paper. At least conceptually, I find it a little bit easier to conceptualize in paper. Um, Obviously, you can do it electronically, but I find it easier to conceptualize. So let's say there's 10 people running. Okay, there's 10 people running, and let's suppose each voter has voted for all 10 people in order of preference. Um, um, we don't actually have to assume that. Let's assume there's 10 people voting. Let's assume there's 10 people running, and the voters have voted. Each voter has gone in and voted for somewhere between 1 and 10 of the people in ranked order. All right. So you have all the voters have voted, and they've each voted for between 1 and 10 of the people running, and they've put them in ranked order. Okay. So here's what you do. Here's what you do. All right. First step, you take a look at each ballot and you take a look at the first name on the list because they're in ranked order. All right. So you take a look at the person who's positioned in number 1. All right. And you put the ballots in a pile based on who is listed number 1. All right. So for each ballot, you take a look at the first name on the list and you put it in a pile for that name. So now you have 10 piles of names, right? Because there's 10 people running. You take a look at the first name on the list. You put it in a pile for that name. So now you have 10 piles. All right. So what you do is you ask yourself, okay. So the first question you have to ask is how many people do you want to win? Like how many people are you trying to elect? So Alaska has said 4. We're trying to elect 4 people. 4 people we're going to put onto the general election. Okay. So we need to know who has the most. We need to know which 4 candidates to take, and we have 10 names. All right. So what we do is we take a look at and we say, okay, which pile is the smallest? Which pile has the fewest votes? Right? Because each voter went in and voted. They voted for 1 of 10 candidates as their first choice. We're going to assume, of course, that they're not evenly distributed because that would be really weird. We're going to assume that some of their piles are bigger than other piles because that's kind of realistic, right? And so we say, okay, well, we have 10 piles. That's too many. Which pile is the smallest? All right. So let's say it's candidate 10. Candidate 10 is the smallest person. It's like, okay, fine. So candidate 10, you're eliminated from the race because you have the smallest pile of the 10 candidates. All right, fine. So now we take a look at candidate 10's candidate 10's ballots, and we strike out the top name on the list. Right? So there's each ballot has a list of names. So for each ballot in candidate 10's pile, we strike out the top name on the list, which is candidate 10, because candidate 10 is no longer in the race. Okay. And then we say, okay, well, who's next? Right? And presumably, although every one of the ballots is there because candidate 10 was their first choice, as to who their second choice is, there's going to be a distribution, right? There's going to be a difference, like, because now there's 9 different possible candidates. And, some are going to be more likely than others, I would think, they're not going to be evenly distributed, but we'll take them and we'll redistribute them into the 9 piles. It's like, okay, fine. So we've done that. Now we have 9 piles. All right, what do we do? Take the smallest pile, strike out the top name, redistribute. Now we have 8 piles. And you just keep doing that until you have 4 piles left. Yeah. So you just keep doing that until you have 4 piles or 2 piles or whatever it is you need, or 1 pile. Whatever it is you do, and however many positions it is that you're trying to do, that's how you do it. So hopefully that explains it. In pure theory, it could be slightly more possible of cheating because a dishonest actor could add rank 3, 4, 5 to someone whose ballot didn't. Well, yes. I mean, that's always true. People can always, I mean, you are, but we are already paranoid when it comes to counting ballots, right? We're already paranoid by having parties watch and everything else. So like you can prevent, yes, it could allow someone to manipulate the ballots, but we're already paranoid against that anyway. So that's not a realistic concern. Clear as mud. I don't know how to make it any clearer. I don't know how to make it any clearer. All right, I can think of one way to make it clear. All right, here's one way to make it clear. Um, take a deck of cards. All right, take a deck of cards and shuffle the deck of cards because you can simulate it. I'm going to teach you how to simulate it so you can show it for yourself, okay? Take the deck of cards and shuffle them. And then you don't deal off all the cards. You deal off maybe half of them. But you sort them by suit, right? And you can see that they're not going to be even. And so it's like, okay, so now you strike that suit and you can redo it. Like that's one way of kind of simulating it, right? It's like it's not perfect one for one, but I'll give you an idea. So it's like one way you could do this is like, okay, let's it's not perfect, but take a deck of cards, shuffle them. Okay, distribute half the cards by suit. All right, so you're going to have 4 piles. They're not going to be even because you're only distributing half the cards. All right, which pile has the smallest? All right, eliminate that suit now from consideration. All right, and then you so you throw them out. You can redistribute the rest and so forth and so on. It's a way of simulating it. There's ways of doing it, but anyways, I've got to run for now. I've got something else I need to attend to, but I hope this has been helpful. Remember to do YouTubey things, like, comment, subscribe. Until later, I hope all is well. Cheers, my friends, and goodbye.